G'day, mate. 40 here. So I often don't know what I think until I get some different perspectives, and like everybody else, I largely define myself against, right? I'll hear an opinion that I take strong exception to, and then that provides clarity for what I think. And I don't know what I think until I read or hear something that I strongly object to. And so I strongly object to Colin Liddell's perspective that Donald Trump is clearly senile and out of his mind. And I think from whatever medical specialty focuses on senility, right, cognitive decline, neurology, I would assume, I don't believe there are objective signs that Donald Trump is senile, right? The man is pretty sharp, and you can see it by the way he speaks. And so I don't think that this Trump administration is just a bunch of incoherent policies coming out of the addled mind of Donald Trump. Rather, what makes this Trump administration different from all other Trump administrations, it's the level of preparation on his team. Right? Russell Vought, behind the scenes, for the first time, has put forward a plan to rein in the independent agencies, the EPA, approximately 50 other independent federal agencies, independent from the executive, from the judiciary, from the legislature. Right now, they're being brought into line with the executive branch, and we're going to have political appointees embedding in all of these quote-unquote independent agencies based on a theory of the unitary executive, which there's a good chance that much of it will stand up in court. Let's just say 50% of it stands up in court, right? This will be huge. So the EPA and 50 other federal agencies like it have largely just done their own thing, right? You have all these bureaucrats who, in their interpretations of the law, are essentially making law, enforcing law, and are largely immune from the law. And under Donald Trump's executive orders this week, right, they're going to be brought into line with the president. They're going to have to report to the president, and the president's going to put his people deep into these independent agencies and bring them into line with his priorities. So this Donald Trump administration appears to be the most consequential presidential administration since FDR. And Doge, right? Nobody expected Doge to be dominating the news, but it's absolutely dominating the news. And here is the latest discussion on Doge, that it is aiming at a $2 trillion cut in federal spending and restoring 20% of that to the American taxpayer, which, if they're able to make $2 trillion in cuts, that would mean $5,000 return to American households. So if they only accomplish 20% of that, right, that would mean a $1,000 dividend check to American households and $400 billion cut in the deficit. I think this is a genius move, right? A Doge dividend, right? That'll incentivize taxpayers and concerned citizens to report government waste, and it will enlist people in the Doge project. And a dividend check for the government waste, fraud, and abuse. All right, that could be genius. Now, it all depends on execution, right? That's what football coaches talk about, whether they're going to win the game or not. It depends on the execution of their plans. And success in business depends on if employees buy in and execute on plans. So the recklessness of Elon Musk and many of his Doge pronouncements, right, certainly threatens the viability of Doge. But right now, the Trump administration appears to know what it's doing. Doesn't mean that it won't end up to be a disaster, that they won't make massive mistakes, but there are many years of planning and consideration and care that's being executed on now. It's not just rantings from the addled mind of Donald Trump. And one thing that strikes me about coverage of Ukraine is how it's just taken for granted that Ukraine played no role in Russia choosing to invade it. What I would satirize as, Ukraine didn't do nothing. Just didn't do nothing. It was just minding its own business. It was just a good boy. It was just getting its life together. But Ukraine took all sorts of steps to try to ally with the West that were sure to provoke retaliation from Russia, which is exactly what happened. And when Donald Trump says that Putin would not have done this under his watch, right, there's a pretty strong basis for this, because Putin seized Crimea under Barack Obama, and he invaded Ukraine under Joe Biden, but he didn't take any territory when Donald Trump was president. So, contrary to Mearsheimer or many others who didn't expect Trump to be able to settle the Ukraine war, right, it looks like Donald Trump has set a really solid foundation to settle this war. And fine, give Russia what it wants, all right? Those parts of Ukraine that are primarily Russian-speaking, they belong with Russia. Ukraine needs to learn that it does not have an independent foreign policy any more than Canada and Mexico have an independent foreign policy. Both Canada and Mexico live next to the United States of America, and they have to take into consideration American concerns, or America will absolutely wreck them. So I'm thankful for a response on X this morning about how I'll have to apologize for Orange Man Hitler and his perfidy and idiocy. Right, I love the direction of Trump right now. Right, if we can settle the Ukraine war, right, and restore Russia to normal relations, right, we don't know how much untold damage Russia has been doing to the United States behind the scenes, because we have strongly incentivized Russia to undercut American interests at every opportunity due to our support for Ukraine, right? If we can stop creating that incentive and perhaps start to wean Russia away from China, right, that would be huge. That would be the equivalent of Nixon goes to China in the early 1970s. And the Trump honeymoon seems to be over, according to the polls. I recognize that. So Donald Trump has never been widely popular. I'd say his approval ratings are dropping, but he still retains power over the Republican Congress. He still retains his base. And if he can get Congress to come through with a budget and pass a reconciliation bill to cut government spending, continue some form of the tax cuts from the first term, and make defending our borders a priority, right, that should be a huge win. And Donald Trump has crushed illegal immigration. Right, illegal immigration is way down. Right, it is less than 50% of the rate it was in December. And that's huge, right? For Trump supporters, control of the borders is absolutely a top priority. So promise made, promise kept. I'm not saying that deluded, addled paranoid, senile president that Colin Liddell is referring to on social media. I also noticed that CEO confidence is the highest it's been in a long time. So even with the disruption of tariffs, right, overall, American CEOs feel confident about the direction of the economy. Right, and that should be good for the stock market and for 401k plans and for consumer confidence. You've got more and more companies reshoring manufacturing in the United States, and they are shifting their supply chains increasingly out of China. So Apple, for example, is making more and more iPhones in India. So this is a good thing for American interests. And a great discussion on the morning meeting right now. Mark Halperin's show between Sean, Dan, and Mark with regard to Trump's Ukraine peace plan. I loved Halperin's perspective that Trump says a lot of words that are sure to offend many sensitivities, but if he gets it done, if he gets some kind of peace deal done and stops the war, then that's the most important thing. Now, who's going to guarantee Ukraine's safety? Right. The best guarantee of Ukraine's safety is that Russia doesn't have the capacity or the incentive or the will to take over all of Ukraine, let alone threaten any other countries in Eastern Europe, let alone Western Europe. So that's your best guarantee of safety, when your enemy doesn't have the means or the incentive to do further harm to you. Right? It's not in Russia's interest to take over majority anti-Russian parts of Ukraine. Right? Russia's going to walk away from this war with control over pro-Russian parts of Ukraine, which makes sense, which is a good deal. One reason that we had so much peace and stability after World War II in Europe is that people were returned to their home nations. So the German diaspora was forcibly repatriated to Germany. It was done in a brutal way, and so up to 2 million Germans died from this kind of ethnic cleansing. But returning peoples to their home nation did bring up levels of internal cohesion and trust, and created much stronger nation states. And so aligning those parts of Ukraine that are already primarily sympathetic to Russia and placing them under Russian control, right, that's good for future peace and prosperity. Hey, Total Tech. I believe that Trump has been using his influence effectively. I agree. Good to see you back, Total Tech. So, still exciting days. And while in the first term, one often had the feeling that Trump administration didn't know what it's doing, I don't get that feeling this time around. I get a much stronger sense that Trump administration doesn't know what it's doing, because it's not just inventing policy on the fly, right? I sure get the sense that many of these policies have been premeditated for years, and that smart organizations have been drawing them up. So we have the emergence of MAGA think tanks. Right? We now have a growing intellectual and governing think tank movement behind Donald Trump, which has produced more serious, thought-through, careful, considered plans for this Trump administration. You did not have that in the first Trump administration. And so you have think tanks that are now 100% MAGA, and then you have think tanks that are Republican and MAGA sympathetic, like Heritage. And you need both, right? You need multiple perspectives. One thing I love about the way Trump operates is that he brings in people with all sorts of different perspectives. So he has people who are restrainers, or you could call them isolationists, He has people with more traditional Republican Party foreign policy, like Marco Rubio. He has people leaning more towards free trade, people like Peter Navarro, who often sounds unhinged protectionist. I know that Peter Navarro made all sorts of false claims about Australia's aluminum industry, that it was controlled by China. It's not. That it's been dumping its products in America. It hasn't. Australia has long run a major trade deficit with US, meaning a trade surplus for the United States. That may be, in part, an arrangement to compensate America for protecting Australia. But Navarro is, strongly on the protectionist side. And then there are others who lean more towards free trade. Now, Trump said a lot of words that has disturbed the Europeans, but that's not going to completely blow up trust and affiliation between the United States and Europe. It's going to be a shock to the system that in the end, the United States and Europe are deeply intertwined with each other, and you'll see rhetoric out of many European leaders that America has now become an enemy of Europe. But I don't think that's going to be how people actually govern. So the most profound change in American foreign policy under Donald Trump is in rhetoric towards a more chauvinist, isolationist, or not isolationist, but more nakedly American partisan approach to foreign policy, and less about maintaining the global order. But here's the thing about American foreign policy. Its rhetoric is not usually matched up with its actions. So the United States got rich and powerful by largely abstaining from World War I and World War II until a lot of the killing and damage had been done. And the United States entered World War I late and entered World War II comparatively late, and was able to swing the balance of both wars and take away from that a tremendous amount of superpower standing and control. Because despite the beautiful words about democracy, right, the United States operated in a brutally realistic way, allowing the different sides to slaughter each other. And then the United States comes in partway through or near the end to provide the decisive effort and to emerge with the benefits of having been the decider. And so the United States only departed from generally brutal, realistic foreign policy after the fall of the Soviet Union, right, when it had the luxury of being the world's sole superpower. So the difference between the Trump administration's foreign policy and American foreign policy prior to 1991 is in rhetoric. Right, America was brutally realistic. Prior to that, it just clothed this realism in very pious, liberal-sounding words. Talk to you later.